Alright, I just got sent this in chat, and it definitely caught my eye. Vladimir Putin reportedly orders exploration of Russian games console. The consideration is reportedly part of a plan to develop Russia's native games industry. Per Russia Today, granted, Russia Today is not the most reliable source, it is a literally Russian state media, like literally, but obviously there's not really much of a motive to lie about anything here, besides maybe some fluffing of Putin. Putin's order was issued following a meeting earlier this week in which he instructed the government to, quote, weigh requirements for organizing production of both stationary and portable games consoles in Russia. That's right, guys, they're trying to make the Putin station, or the Putin box. The deadline for executing the order has reportedly been set for June 15th, 2024. Damn, we're getting the Putin box soon, guys. We're getting that shit soon. As part of the order, the president also called the cabinet of ministers to look at developing an operating system and a cloud system for delivering games to users, according to a statement published on the Kremlin's website. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov explained that the president's order to consider the creation of a Russian console was aimed at developing Russia's native gaming industry. Several high-profile gaming companies ceased operating in Russia in 2022 following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Sony, Microsoft, EA, Activision, Blizzard, Nintendo, and more all removed themselves from the area due to the geopolitical climate. That's actually surprising that Blizzard did it, because, like, isn't Blizzard very friendly with China? And isn't, China relatively friendly with Russia? Interesting. I guess not direct enough for China to consider it. Not anymore, you're right, because ever since the invasion of Ukraine, Russia and China haven't been getting along as much. You're right. You're completely right, I remember that. As reported by PC Mag, Russian newspaper Kommersant reports that Putin has likely entrusted the Russian technology company VK to carry out the plan. You know, you can say this is a complete joke if you want, but isn't Tetris a completely Russian game? Like, Tetris, the video game, one of the video games of all time, was made by a Russian, wasn't it? Or did it just get popular in Russia? Doesn't the term "from Russia with love" come from the, like, front of the box for Tetris? Maybe it existed before that, and that's why they used it on the box, but I could swear that's where the term comes from. It's at least the first ever usage of the term I can remember. The theme, like the Tetris music, is a Russian folk song made into 8-bit music. Yeah, I'm aware of that. That's a really cool detail about that. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but one of the most, common American household names, household brands, was literally just blasting Russian folk music in 8-bit in people's living rooms back in, like, the Cold War era. Yeah, what is the story behind that, by the way? Here, let me bring up a video on that, because it's actually quite interesting. The story behind Tetris is actually quite interesting. There's a, We're not watching a Watch Mojo video. This video seems fine. Here, let's finish the article first. However, the newspaper states that market participants say that there is no competence to produce their own PlayStation and Xbox consoles, and creating such a system from scratch will take up to 10 years. What they're not understanding here, what Putin doesn't understand apparently, is that creating a game console is not an easy task. What you're essentially doing, and this is a gamer talking about this stuff, not a game developer, but I know a few game devs, you know, I know a couple game devs, I'm kind of a big deal. And my understanding is that when it comes to console development, it's quite difficult, because on one level, what you're basically making is a gaming PC. But a gaming PC that is made to run a specific way, run off of a custom in-house operating system, and is made to take the most advantage of the hardware it has as possible when running the games that it's going to run as possible. So you have to already have a manufacturer of high-quality parts. This ranges from, like, power supplies and power bricks. Like, for example, Xbox had a big problem with this back in the day, where having an internal power supply was, like, they couldn't figure that out. So the old Xbox 360s had this big fat brick you had to plug in as, like, a middle point to hooking one up to the wall, because that was their power supply. Like, you couldn't just hook it up directly because there wouldn't be enough power flow. It had to have, like, a backup storage of power. And the PlayStation 3 was always able to have it inside of there, but that's one whole issue, is figuring out how to make a small form factor way of, like, keeping all of these parts, right? On top of that, once you get the form factor small, you have to think about cooling. Cooling something that small with powerful parts is difficult. And then, of course, you have to worry about the fact it needs to be efficient, because a game console has to release and have at least 8 to 10 years of lifetime, of, like, you know, what's the term for it? Future-proof ability, right? It needs to still be able to run games up to 10 to 12 years in the future, right? When they're going to cut off the releases for new games on that console, because it's just not good enough to run them anymore, and it's practically scamming people to even sell copies for it. So, at that point, you have to find a way to get the game companies to work with your console company so that they will develop the games for your console. This isn't just a matter of Putin needing them to make consoles and just ship them out and you just throw games in there. These companies would have to develop the games for those consoles, specifically, made to run on the operating systems of those consoles, the Putin box, whatever specifically. We're talking about, at the very least, 10 years of development time this is going to take. Let's say they use RTX 4090s in it. They have to go through the whole process of getting, like, an operating system made. They have to reduce the form factor, keep a good, decent cooling, and prevent there from being, like, the Xbox 360 red rings of death, that, like, type issues. And then they have to get these games companies that are making AAA titles that people actually want to play interested in actually playing or making their games for that platform. Otherwise, who the fuck's gonna buy the Putin box when it has no games? Then again, like we said before, Tetris is a Russian game, and Tetris is, like, one of the games of all time. Can't really deny that. Russia has a decent... Tarkov is a Russian game. Like, you have to admit, Russia does have a pretty decent history when it comes to game development. I am a fan of a fair amount of Russian games.
Of endless video game adaptations comes the true story of one of the world's best-selling video games. Apple's Tetris takes us on a wild journey following the guy who played Elton John into the depths of Soviet Russia. So in this video, we'll be separating fact from fiction and comparing the movie and its characters to what really happened. So grab some vodka and let me blow your cartridge, because this is one wild ride. Meet Hank Rogers, the owner of Bulletproof Software, who discovered Tetris at the 1988 Winter Consumer Electronics Expo in Las Vegas, Nevada. After playing, he was immediately hooked and was put in contact with its exhibitor, Britain's Maxwell Communications. This is where Robert Maxwell comes in, the company's founder and chairman, who also happens to be the father of infamous child abuser Ghislaine Maxwell. So basically a family of upstanding
small world
citizens. You'll notice some of the characters, including Russian leader Mikhail Gorbachev, refer to him as a politician. That's because Robert Maxwell was a member of British Parliament from 1964 to 1970. Some of the more confusing aspects of the Tetris movie is who owned the rights to the game, what those rights entail, and how all this worked during the backdrop of the Cold War. The game was created by Alexei Pajitnov in 1984 when he was working at the Soviet Academy of Science in Moscow. During this time, with rare exceptions, intellectual property was owned by the state and not the individual. So the rights for the game were transferred to a state-run organization called Elektronorgtechnika, or ELORG for short. This was the organization responsible for managing computer software exports from the Soviet Union. In comes Robert Stein. Think of this guy like a video game leech. He'd travel all over the USSR looking for good games, purchase...
Next thing he's gonna tell me is this guy is actually Bobby Kotick's grandfather. Bobby Kotick, the ex-CEO of Activision Blizzard. This is his great-grandfather. It'd be even funnier if, like, Bobby Kotick had some kind of, like, ancestry going back to Nazi Germany. That'd be even funnier.
The rights from Elorg and then resell those rights to distributors across the globe. Now, when you buy these rights...
Alright, he's mostly talking about the movie here, but overall, the point is, there is a lot of reason why many people, especially back when Tetris came out and was really popular, didn't know it was a Russian game. Like, they didn't know. And they didn't know that, like, the music is Russian folk music. So I find that funny. It's just a cool little gaming Easter egg. I don't know how this is gonna go, honestly. Maybe this ends up going really well. To be fair, Russia is a very powerful country. In the grand scheme of things, they have a massive population and a relatively strong economy. There's a pretty big population of gamers in Russia, clearly. That's why Putin is having this type of response. We could see some pretty big, what are now considered indie companies, get state funding due to this, and we might see, like, a Putin Box 360 Tarkov port that ends up selling millions of copies across Russia. We could see, like, a, what's another Russian game? DayZ? Was DayZ Russian? I feel like DayZ's a Russian game. Is DayZ a Russian game? Metro? Yeah, Metro. You know, that could be a big thing. DayZ's not Russian? Was it Arma that was Russian made? I'm certain it's either Arma or the DayZ mod or standalone are made by Russians, okay? Like, some DayZ or Arma related things made by Russians. Stalker is Ukrainian, I believe. That's a Ukrainian dev team, and I may be wrong, though. I could have sworn... Is Stalker... DayZ is Czech? Okay. Atomic Heart? Yeah, Atomic Heart's a Russian team. Yeah, you're right. Stalker is definitely Ukrainian, yeah. I forgot TBH, yeah. Ukrainian. I'd love a Russian hockey game. That could be interesting. Regardless, though, this is just another way that Putin and Russia in general are just trying to spread their influence and kind of get into industries that have other... We're actually seeing this right now with Saudi Arabia as well. The, like, current Prince of Saudi Arabia has, like, 5,000 hours in Dota 2 or something like that, and is a massive gamer, and is pushing heavily to use state funding in order to invest in like, esports. Buying out large game, what's the term for it? Leagues. They're buying out leagues for these games, much like one might buy out a sports team, and profiting off of the success and enforcing their culture and rules, of course, as well, onto esports. Hey guys, how much do you want to bet the Saudi Arabian prince-owned esports team is going to allow any women to compete on their team? How much do you want to bet they'll allow that when Saudi Arabia funds them? I don't know.